My second question was similarly sort of um, I don't know, a bit revisionist. But do you think do you think there's differences between Steiner and Barfield? That's really the nub of the question. And one difference that I wonder about is whether, in a way, Barfield is more Christian. The figure of Christ does seem to be the second person of the Trinity in Barfield, whereas in Steiner, although he says many different things, the idea that the Christ is a kind of solar God and that resurrects into the etheric and so on, it makes Christ seem much more like one player amongst others, even if a big one, important. He still will say, Christ is a turning point of history and so on. But do you think there are actually differences between Steiner and Barfield?
I think you're right. I think Steiner's inconsistent because sometimes he'll say, and for some reason, I find it interesting, like he'll say the God, the God, referencing Christ. And yes, this notion of it's kind of confusing, like how Christ is associated with the Son. But partially, like, the way I've come to read that association is like this analogical relationship between everything in the cosmos. And so, like, Christ can be the divine logos and the Trinity and the Godhead, but also like analogically present in the Son and the sort of Trinity of the sun, the moon, and earth, and like that as a kind of recapitulation of the divine Trinity. But also, as I touched on in the part where I talk about Steiner's racism, there's a unpublished lecture where he says something like white skin predisposes people to be more fit to receive the Christ impulse and its individuating. And I just find that very unchristian. And yeah, I think Barfield is more consistent as a Christian in his thinking than Steiner. And Steiner sometimes, yes, it does seem sometimes like Christ is like a very high God, but a God among gods. But I also think that I like to think of, Christ as the second person of the Trinity and maintain that. And I also like, personally, just like this talk of many gods, but not in a way that diminishes the Trinity, but that fans out from the Trinity. And so that's one thing I find attractive about Steiner, is that like his whole cosmology is so like teeming with all kinds of different beings. And so I would say that Barfield and Steiner are different in that way, and I do think Steiner is even a bit more. I feel like some anthroposophists would really not like this, but he sounds like the way he talks about the future of the Earth, like Barfield doesn't really go there quite like that, like the merging with the machine. Like Barfield doesn't ever really talk about that. So there's distinction there too. And there is that in that dialogue, Worlds Apart, the Sanderson character, who we could say maybe represents Barfield, in that he's got like 3 tiers of how he relates to what Steiner said, and the third tier is, I don't know what to say about that. so maybe, yeah.
I remember reading that and being very relieved.
Yeah. Especially, there's like some things like I have a really hard time with the 2 Jesus children thing, and so I just don't know what to think about that yet. So,
hey, thanks for me again. I'll hand on.
Thank you, Mark.